Okay.
Cool. All right. Welcome everyone. My name is Tsobani, and I'm going to be moderating the tech side of the session. We're very honored today to have Tony, as we affectionately call him, Lehlohonolo Fortune Kekana, who's going to be presenting on the topic of vaccine hesitancy, and ethnographic exploration of public health institutions. I was honored to be the supervisor of Kekana's work, which has recently been successfully examined with excellent results and glowing reviews from leading distinguished professor in the field of medical anthropology. I just want to begin by reading an excerpt from one of the examiner comments about Kekana's work and why we invited him as Gauteng Anthropology to present his groundbreaking work. The reviewer, the distinguished professor, writes this about Kekana's work. He says, Kekana's work highlights the skills and interests of Kekana and illustrates his capacity to conceptualize, draw on established theory, conduct ethnographic field work, and analyze the data. His writing is very strong, and there are exceptionally strong sections in his work with incisive comments and some engaging ethnography. Kekana has illustrated a broad and thoughtful reading of literature and has shown through his writing scholarly reflection on how academic knowledge is produced, how it is translated into policies and programs through institutionalized hierarchies, and the possible shortcomings of this in terms of health outcomes of vulnerable people. Kekana's approach to studying up is core to our understanding of the relations of populations to institutions of government and to the exercise of power. He clearly has the capacity for further research, and I look forward to tracking his career should he decide to do a PhD. And I just want to read again from the second examiner, who writes that that they were excited that a student at a South African university had the foresight to resuscitate this notion of studying up that has been the mainstay of the examiner's formative journey. The notion of studying up is one that seems to have been lost in the South African anthropological discourse. This behoves such departments to really introspect on this and to seek ways of addressing this. This study was an ambitious one that put out there where learning on one's feet was a matter of survival. It is in such situation of courage that true learning takes place, where theory gains its meaning in practice. And I think, colleagues, that really sums up why we wanted to have Kekana to, because anthropology has for a long time really been focused on studying down. So it's always been focused on studying marginalized, which is not, of course, not unimportant on its own. But I think it's important, the contribution that Kekana's work makes to really start looking at institutions, particularly like the NICD and many, many others, through critical ethnographic lens. So without wasting any more time, I will hand over to Kekana, and hopefully we can have a really beautiful, productive discussion at the end. So over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. Thank you for that that warm and delightful introduction. I think in future we should discuss the prospects of you writing a memoir about myself. I would like to also extend my thanks to everyone who's joining us today. Hopefully today's talk will leave you speechless and completely devoid of any questions that you might want to pose it at the end of the talk. Crossing fingers. Before we can start, technology, guys. Okay, I think I might have to continue with the slides. Before we can start, I would like to highlight that this talk or presentation, if you will, is based on my master's dissertation, which drew attention to a specific public health institute, the National Institute for Communicable Diseases in Johannesburg. As such, I used this institution as a blueprint to figuring out more or less public health institutions in general, how they function, and to explore their current understandings, meanings, and operationalizations of vaccine hesitancy. So how did this study or research interest come about? In my initial investigations of vaccine hesitancy, I noticed that much of the work that was done on the subject was largely achieved through the opinions of parents, was largely achieved through studying down the opinions of parents, caregivers, and sometimes healthcare workers, and never on public health institutions. And yes, while these studies were important in advancing knowledge on vaccine hesitancy, they still left important gaps in understanding the multifaceted phenomenon of vaccine hesitancy. It sort of like created a single story about vaccine hesitancy. So at this particular juncture, this is where I realized that in order to try and complete the story, attention needs to be brought towards the same institutions that have opinions, that have created opinions about vaccine hesitant people, and to kind of place them under a microscope as a way of bringing them into these conversations. Because in essence, vaccine hesitancy represents the battle of ideologies between vaccine hesitant individuals and public health institutions. So moving forward, part of the reason why I think there was scant attention towards public health institutions in scholarship about vaccine hesitancy, particularly as far as anthropology is concerned, is due to this growing relationship between medical anthropologists and biomedicine. Over the years, we've seen anthropologists working more closely with scientists, public health professionals in an attempt to help the biomedical sector understand health from sort of like a different perspective. However, scholars such as Singer have argued that because of this relationship, medical anthropology in particular has become something of a service sector to biomedicine, due to its tendency to portray foreign health behaviors through dressing them up in biomedical garments. So as such, anthropology has been exposed to the process of medicalizations enabled by the availability of medical research funding and employment opportunities. So because medical anthropologists are often funded or work for the biomedical sector, their research is often limited by the expectation that come with this kind of relationship. So much of their research is directed towards appeasing the funders of the employers, if you will. So as a consequence, medical anthropologists often fail to draw ethnographic attention to their funders or to biopowers, if you will. So as I will take you to my own research on the Institute of Communicable Diseases to kind of give you like a context. The first day when I got to the NICD, I was instantly told by public health professionals that vaccine hesitancy is something they rarely talk about in meetings or in informal conversations. And the reason behind this lack of, verbal engagement was sort of like attributed to the fact that in South Africa, at the time of this research, of course, vaccine hesitancy was not as prevalent as it was in some parts of Africa or Europe and America. So because the vaccination coverage in SA was relatively high at the time, public health professionals grew complacent and neglected talking about this phenomenon. However, this does not necessarily mean that they are not aware that vaccine hesitancy exists in South Africa, because in 2017, the NICD did perform a response to a measles outbreak in a community that was characterized by a high rate of vaccine refusal due to religious concerns. But the main argument here is that the reason why vaccine hesitancy has not received traction in SA is because it is not seen as a real, tangible healthcare issue. Vaccine hesitancy is not something that has tangibly affected healthcare to a point where it became a source of much debate in public health conversation. So because vaccine hesitancy has not materialized into the re-emergence of vaccine preventable diseases such as polio on a large scale proportion, I think public health institutions have framed it as something that has no, bearing towards prevalent healthcare issues such as TB and HIV. So while vaccine hesitancy did not take precedence, in public health conversations at NICD, much of the public health activities were geared towards implicitly addressing issues of vaccine hesitancy. So coded in these activities were awareness campaigns aimed at improving the public's understanding of communicable diseases and motivating vaccine acceptance. For example, when I was at the NICD, they produced a documentary film about the lives of polio survivors, to sort of like create awareness about the dangers of polio if not vaccinated. One of the survivors on the documentary, which I found to be interesting, went on to encourage people to vaccinate and to look at them as inconvenient examples of what happens when one does not vaccinate. So so this brings me to the overall understanding of vaccine hesitant individuals by public health professionals at the NICD. They sort of like framed vaccine hesitant people as lacking an understanding of biomedicine. So from such explanation, it became apparent that public health professionals sort of like have a different way of conceptualizing knowledge and beliefs, in comparison to lay persons. In that regard, knowledge and beliefs within the public health community are viewed as two opposing terms. In such a view, knowledge would constitute accepting vaccines as a viable preventive measure against the spread of communicable diseases, and being aware that the benefits of these vaccines outweigh the disadvantages which generally come in a form of negative side effects. So in contrast, beliefs are defined as ideas that are often erroneous in that they oppose biomedical perspectives and can include seeking help from spiritual healers who are not perceived to be scientific in their methods. So, as such, the term knowledge insinuates that information is nothing more than a scientific fact based on universal truths. I think that is why vaccine hesitant individuals within the public health community are often referred to as lacking the appropriate knowledge because of their belief systems are in contrast with biomedical fraternity of information. However, public health professionals at the NICD seem to be aware of this ideological difference that exists between them. So in their response programs, when responding to outbreaks, they often use members of anti-vaxxer communities who are not anti-vaccine to persuade them to vaccinate. So this approach is performed because members of the same communities have a way of understanding each other because of the deeper beliefs they share. I had also had an example that I wanted to share in the slide about this particular instance. So I hope it shows. So with one of my interlocutors that I talked to at the NICD, he said, so what we also did, what was also done with the measles outbreak, where we found in a certain community that are predominantly anti-vaxxers, we used somebody they knew in the community. So if I can say it was a Muslim community, we used a Muslim organization that was not anti-vaccine to try and reach to that group. Because if you go in and say vaccines are good for you, it is the same speech they have heard many times. But if you use one of their own who believes in the same religion to actually talk to them, in that instance, from our side, it was not us going in to give them information about vaccine, but we tried to use someone they can identify with to try and give health promotion. So this actually speaks to what I've just shared with you guys. So what was also interesting throughout this research was that the utterances of these interlocutors at the NICD, for the most part, were bounded by contextual ideas about their biomedical and scientific culture. As such, the utterances made were reflective of the professional world that they immerse themselves in. So behind these professional beliefs lacks the professional belief that public health programs sought to replace with accurate knowledge. So in reality, with some of the interlocutors that I interviewed, the ones who were currently mothers at the time, shared to me that they also had certain concerns about vaccines because during their time they've also witnessed kids suffer from the side effects of vaccines. but they knew that despite all of that, they still had to vaccinate their children because the negatives do not outweigh the positives of the vaccines. So with that, I want just to say that the truth is not to be found in the utterances of the informant, but the informant is just, caught up in the politics and poetics of representation as the researcher. So that is, the utterances of the informant are not unmediated. They are just claims, made in response to and in a particular socially, politically fraught relationship. So without wasting any more time, I think this is where I want to end this talk. So I would like to open the floor for questions. And I just want to highlight with that your questions will be highly appreciated because they will help me in trying to further this research on a PhD level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kekan, for that interesting presentation. So please feel free to raise up your hand. I prefer if people actually verbalize their questions, but if for some reason you're in a place where you can't, it's okay to put your question in the chat. But if you want to ask, okay, there's one hand. We'll take 3 questions. Anyone else? Okay, I see question number 2. Okay, last one. One more person, going once, going twice. Okay, let's take the first 2 so long. Dr. Marian Brooke was first, and then we'll come to you, Precious.
Hi. So I think this is a really interesting topic. And my disclaimer is I'm a public health person, a medical person, and so I wanted to make an observation, 1, and 2, a question. So the observation is the model that you talk about, the idea that anthropology is constrained by the medical system and the biomedical kind of elements, I think is actually something that biomedicine itself is limited by, and it's mostly related to funding structures that are still very much based on a basic science model, which doesn't even serve all of biomedicine's research. So I think in and of itself, that point that you made about the ways in which anthropology is restrained can actually be really explored. And like, I think it could be its own chapter for sure. And that area would be useful to all of biomedicine to critique the ways in which has been limited by funding mechanisms, timelines, and research procedures that are very much in line with basic science, which is not universally acceptable. So that's one. So then my question for you is, how do we reconcile the lack of attention to the issue with the realities, and then how does anthropology serve not just biomedicine but like the community to um, reconcile the element that, if you study this and find out a lot of good information, that it may not even get out there. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you make sure that your work has a tangible effect in the community? Sorry, my baby's back.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brooks, and send our love to Lorato. Okay, Precious, you're next.
Okay, sorry, Doctor, to disrupt you. Can I take one question at a time? I don't think my memory will serve me that well to remember all the questions.
Okay, cool. That's okay. So Precious, please hold your question.
Um, to answer you, Dr. Brooks, I think first and foremost, anthropologists need to remain loyal to their epistemologies. They need to understand the nature of their work, and the kind of effects it has on the community as a whole. So I think this notion of studying up, it's something that can motivate anthropologists to not just neglect studying their biopowers. I think going forward, if we produce more of these studies in studying up their biopowers, I think that will sort of lead us to something. And I think for anthropologists who have sort of like relationships with these biopowers, from the biomedical fraternity, I think they need to make aware that, in fact, scratch that. I think we need to have more of funding. I think that is one of the things that kind of constrain anthropologists to study people in power. It's because the same people fund most of their work. So I think if we could have more funding for anthropologists that are outside, the biomedical fraternity, I think maybe they'll have a bit more freedom to start and draw attention to these biopowers. I don't know if that answers your question then.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure Dr. Brooks can come back if she. Okay, I just see it in the chat. She just wrote yes, that does answer it. Thank you. Okay, Precious, over to you.
Hello. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Hi, Kekana. Thank you so much for the great presentation. And I'm a student actually, doing my honors in anthropology, and I intend to look at the medical side of anthropology, specifically public health. So I've got a question for you. I don't know how to phrase this question, but I kind of have questions at looking at the current situation, COVID-19. What do you think the future knowledge making will presage after the, actually, let's see. I didn't phrase my question very well, but let me just say, what do you think are the relations and roles of anthropological and medical knowledge in the studies of illnesses as well as bodies?
Okay, thank you for that question, Precious. I think the future. I think anthropology, they are most, in their essence, they try to bring a different perspective to understanding illnesses and health. In that regard, they try to bring this alternative, ways of thinking, and try to try and create a relationship with the knowledge that comes from public health institutions, to try and manage that information in a way that doesn't create conflicts. So, and I think because this vaccine hesitancy represents this conflict, is that both people both people from the end of this sticks have different ways of kind of conceptualizing health and illnesses, and you find that people from the public health, they try and enforce their knowledge and try to force people to adopt their way of thinking, instead of trying to find a common ground where both sets of information or sets of way of thinking can be merged together to try and create more of a universal understanding of illness and diseases. I don't know if that answers your question, Precious.
Well, yeah, it does answer my question.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, Precious. Okay, we'll have one. Okay, we have one hand. Toko, over to you.
Talking. Hi, Doc. Hi, Hloni. Sorry, my thing was on mute, so I was muted. Thank you, Hloni, for such a wonderful presentation. I have one question. You said something about you found that the people you interviewed said something along the lines of it was the lack of knowledge about about the benefits of vaccine that led to the hesitancy. I don't know if I got that right.
The lack of understanding biomedicine, yeah.
Yes. So I want my question is a simple one. I wanted to find out if they said anything about low confidence that we have in public institutions as a cause for or as a factor in vaccine hesitancy. Because I would imagine that a lot of South Africans do not have a lot of confidence in public institutions. So did that come up in any of your interviews?
I mean, yeah, and all of that was framed under this notion that people lack, a clear understanding of how biomedicine work. So everything is just placed under that blanket understanding, that blanket explanation of that. So basically, people who don't have training, sort of biomedical training, will not have a clear understanding of how biomedicine should work. So what should happen is that people should only put their trust in something that they don't understand, but they should only put trust in that they trust that these people who produce these medicines, they know what they're doing. They know better. So people should try and trust them, put their trust on them if they can't put their trust on the medicine, but put trust on their knowledge because they went to school, they studied these things, so they know better. I think that's the kind of framings that I got.
Thank you for that. There's one more question in the comment, but before I go to it, let's go to Paseka.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Mine is not a question. It's just a comment. Because throughout the study, I've been thinking, and also with previous engagements that we would have had with ourselves over the last year, trying to make sense of what we would have seen on social media and on our phones, specifically on WhatsApp and whatnot, the circulation of conspiracy, what we regard or what we call and refer to as conspiracy theories around vaccinations and specifically in the context of COVID-19, the virus itself. So I was thinking that one of the reasons, obviously with me myself, I was very there was a point where I got very irritated and very angry saying that, but people have now started to believe conspiracy theories more than science, the science or the biomedicine which is presented to them and the ideas which are brought forward. But then as I critically engaged myself, I started asking myself questions like, and which is something that happened again now, I started asking myself questions like, we have historical contexts and examples of what happened to us where HIV was spread in a specific way to make sure that it kills as many or it takes down the population of Black people in a specific and a scientific way, and there was a way that it was introduced which was unethical and basically moving towards genocidal in the way that it is, or in the way that it was what do you call this? I'm not trying to say elevate, but it was basically it was there's a word that I'm looking for, I'm struggling with it, but let me just use perpetuated in the community and specifically in the Black community. And also the case of what we see in America where syphilis was spread through the Black population and whatnot. So those people, because of our historic memory and how we identify with medicine, specifically Western biomedical medicine, has become one of the reasons, and I believe a very primary and a core reason for our people to say and become skeptical when they are presented with scientific knowledge and biological knowledge and information about specific vaccinations and the context of a virus itself, and in this specific context, the virus being COVID. So I was just thinking of that is that something that maybe comes out a lot, the historical factors that might have contributed to skepticism and the way that we perceive and we look at vaccinations, and why we would be so hesitant, apart from the fact that, you know, the administrative part of it, whether the government can supply vaccines or not, whether the government will afford vaccines or not, you know, apart from that, but the historical context that is very important to contextualize the way that we perceive. And when I say we perceive, the people who become very skeptical when it comes to being vaccinated perceive the vaccination itself and become thus hesitant. Thank you very much. Sorry for that long thingy.
No worries. That was so powerful. Thank you, Paseka. Shoni?
No, man, true. I mean, vaccine hesitance is a long-standing history. You know, it can be dated as far as the 1800s. It's something that has been going on for forever. And most of it was due to trust, you know, the lack of trust in the state. So the state and the public sort of like have like an interesting relationship that often dwindles down to other institutions of the state. So I think even now, people still don't trust the state, you know, and I think that is something that we can also explore.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Pravir?
Thanks, Dr. Kobani. Thanks, Fortune, for this informative presentation. It really speaks to my own research as well. But basically, I just wanted to get your opinion. So basically, your fieldwork was done pre-COVID, so before the whole COVID epidemic hit South Africa. So basically, my question is, how do you think that the COVID epidemic, or the discussion around the COVID-19 pandemic, has affected the debate around other syndemics that are currently going on around South Africa, and particularly what's the debates happening at these public institutions to deliver effective health for communities?
I mean, if you can look at the rollout plan right now of vaccine hesitancy, you would see that the public health are having problems, you know, with distributing vaccines, and you can tell that this also can, you know, fuel the lack of trust that people have in the government. So apart from that, I thought in the initial beginning of this plan, I thought it was initially a good plan to put essential workers such as public health professionals at the forefront of receiving these vaccines. I think this would have shown people that they trust these vaccines. They trust them enough to put them in their bodies, and if they lead by example, maybe people will be motivated to try and get these vaccines. But now, since that they are failing to give us a viable rollout plan, I think this also might fuel, you know, people just giving up on taking vaccines. And that, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. I see you have your hand, Dr. Brooks. We can go to.
I just wanted to ask, just as an extension of the last question, when you do your PhD, are you going to be exploring sort of all vaccines, specific ones, ones that may be more stigmatized, ones that may be less available, and then comparing potentially that to COVID-19 vaccine, just because it's so complicated. Um, there's a lot of talk always about people not understanding science, but actually, like, the understanding of science often also leads to hesitance, right? Like, so people are
Yeah.
seeing that, the rollout plan's not going well, or seeing that AstraZeneca is being pulled, or seeing that there's a lot that is still being discovered in science right now. And I think, like, we talk a lot about culture and history and things like that. And of course, those things matter. But I think also, especially in biomedicine, we tend to under examine the fact that people do understand, and people are actually not making uninformed decisions. They're making sort of like partially informed, or like almost as informed as we can expect somebody to be, if that makes sense. So just wondering how you plan on going about it.
I think for my PhD, I wanted to continue this thing of, just studying up these institutions. I think I wanna know more about their understandings. How do they perceive people's reactions towards their own knowledge. I think I wanna expand a bit more on that. I just don't wanna limit this knowledge on a single institute. So I wanna kind of get a more broader understanding of these institutions and how they operate in terms of their knowledge, and how they kind of distribute that knowledge out there, the manner in which they distribute that knowledge.
Cool. There was a question from Precious, who was asking, what is your take on the rejection of traditional medicine during this time of COVID-19?
I
Tony?
think this also brings me to my initial explanation that, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay, cool. I think this rejection stems from this understanding that biomedicine is more superior than your traditional medicine. This is something that has been also championed by the government, that vaccines are a more viable solution in trying to curb this this pandemic. But again, I think also there is a lack of understanding of these traditional medicines. I don't think people have the right amount of understanding, and how this medicine can also, play a role in trying to curb this pandemic.
Fantastic. Okay, colleagues, we got one last
I hope
round
that
of
answers your
questions,
question.
and then we will close. So if you have questions, raise your hand, and then we're going into the last round. So I see two people. Let's go first with Sipokuhle, and then we'll come back to you, Pasek. So Sipokuhle.
Hi everyone, and hi Shoni. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I think this research sparks a lot of questions in terms of how we theorize on on hesitancy, particularly as someone whose undergraduate major was public administration, and whose thrust in honors was more about knowledge and knowledge systems and knowledge making and decoloniality. I think Okay, let me just outline just some of the factors that I'm thinking about. The first is that one thing that the inefficiency of public institutions does in creating inefficiencies or not being able to sort of provide the public goods that they're supposed to, is that it not only affects the social contract between the rulers and the ruled, but it also causes conflicts within the medical fraternity. So, for example, we have so many doctors that are sitting at home without a job who cannot be placed into our public health system, many of whom actually want to be part of more of the centralized public health system where people work in hospitals as opposed to community clinics and centers. And those, of course, want to also work in private institutions because obviously there's a perceived higher efficiency there. But then there's also this issue of the digitalization of knowledge and how there's the disjuncture for me that I see is that, for example, if there are WhatsApp broadcast messages that are trying to, disparage the effectiveness of vaccines, that also actually means that the democratization of certain technologies enables people to gaze back without the opportunity of speaking back. And by that I mean you can gaze back at a knowledge without actually speaking to the knowledge maker. And that causes a huge disjuncture because as soon as there's a circulation of problematic or sort of untruthful content, that means that you're spreading gossip around, but there's never actually an opportunity to speak to the knowledge maker, because the knowledge maker it is also sort of co-opted by the public institution. So let me try and speak in more specific terms. For example, Professor Abdul Karim has now stepped down from the ministerial advisory team, right? And though one of his responsibilities has been to speak to us as a public, his role has also been to be part of the public health system as an administrator in a way. And what happens is that when his role as an administrator becomes ineffective, then it means he also cannot speak truthfully about his mistakes or the decisions that are taken in his space back to the public. And so another thing is also the epistemic disparities that persist, particularly in terms of the medical field. For example, the Hippocratic Oath, which is an oath that says, no doctor or no person scientist who's responsible for you will ever harm you, is actually a social contract that is not sealed through consent, ever. And so what is happening with the digital era, and I'm going back to that argument, is that there is this mass opportunity to gaze back, but there's no opportunity to speak back. And I guess that's also the thing that then continues to position traditional medical systems as subpar, as non-science. So I'm very interested in how this research might actually open gateways for a different kind of transdisciplinary sense, because for me it sounds like it's the nexus between public administration and policy, anthropology, critical media studies, epistemology, and so on, eugenics and the history of eugenics. and all of that in studying institutions up. But I think to ask the question, what do you think about publics, as in general citizens, as being institutions in and of themselves, as bodies, so to speak? I think I'll end there. I think that was quite a ramble.
Thank you, Sipogoshe.
That was loaded. That was loaded. I think the public it is an institution within itself because produce bodies of knowledge in their own right. They create sort of like a different way of life. But I think how the public, to bring it back to this issue of vaccine hesitancy, I think people who do not vaccinate, are sort of like framed as unsanitary, unsanitary citizens. These are people who need to be cleansed, who need to be freed from their from their problematic knowledges. So I think public it is an institution within itself due to the fact that it produces knowledge. It has actors, it has structures within which things work and operate. So yeah, I think I totally agree with you, man.
Fantastic. Okay, I think Paseka had a question.
Yeah, no, it's also another comment, and it was in reference to Precious's question of the rejection of traditional medicine and Soni's own comment on that. And my comment was based off the idea that we found ourselves in a situation where we've had to have a battle between our what we call traditional medicine and biomedical medicine, yet we have not started to critically engage the two ideas, whereby one looks as though it's traditional because it is our own, yet what we regard as biological, we refer to it as a general sense of medication, forgetting the most important point that in actual fact it itself is actually traditional to a certain context and to a certain people. So this rationalization that we try and what do you call this dichotomy that we always try to put between the two is one which I think is very flawed and very problematic. So we need to always remember that when we try to say one is biological medication or medicine and the other is traditional, we need to remember that the both of them are actually traditional depending on their context. So with this dichotomy that we do between these two, we make one subpar, like my colleague, I think it's Pay or something. I'm sorry, I saw your name, I forgot it. But with what you said about the idea of one being subpar, that is all centered on Western arrogance and perception of everything that comes from a people of a certain region, the general south of the world, being subpar as a people themselves. So their ideas, their perceptions and ideologies of the world, and specifically of their medicine, cannot be on par with that which is our own. Yet a few years ago, I remember I used to make this example in class, and Hlonyu, I think, was also in the class of environmental anthropology about aloe, that Black people have been using aloe for so long in its most natural form. We've been using it for multiple things, and somehow, because now it becomes more socially acceptable in our country and throughout the world, because now it's been modified to look more Western and medically, biologically tested and approved. While technically this is traditional medicine, which we've been using throughout the years. So a lot of the medicine that we've been using, as much as they've been trying to, for many years, they've been trying to downplay, is actually very complex medicine. When you say that one is biologically tested, how do you justify, or how do you make sense of the fact that a people have evolved over years? A people, like the specific case of the Khoi, have evolved over years, with some of them not using any biological manufactured medicine, using what we now refer to as traditional medicine. So I'm just looking at that dichotomy that we tend to try and make, which is fundamentally problematic and very flawed. So I just need us to also be able to conceptualize and understand the gist of this terming of these words or these ideas or these medicines, that it stems from a very racist point of view and a very arrogant, Western specifically arrogant point of view, and us perpetuating and continuing to justify and live in this context and perpetuate these ideas is also a problem on our side. So I just wanted us to be able to also remember that moving forward. So it's just a general comment. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much. Just to provide some context, colleagues, Hloni is actually presenting from work, and he was given the boardroom for a very short specific time. So I'm going to ask that we close. But before we close, if there's really any burning comments, very quick burning comments where someone feels there's something important they wanted to say, please quickly just feel free. Don't even raise your hand, just quickly unmute yourself. But then whilst people are giving their closing comments, then Hloni, you can prepare your own closing comments. And then in the next 5 minutes or so, I think we should be ready to close. And so that we don't get you into trouble at work. Cool. Any last burning comments? Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Hloni, can you just close us off with some final remarks and what you want us to get from this important work that you are doing?
I won't have to say much, but all I can say is that we need to continue bringing attention to these biopowers. We need to place them under a microscope to get a sense of why they do the things that they do, in order to understand them, instead of falling prey to conspiracy theories. I think if you can produce more studies about these biopowers, I think that can help. Some of these practices are done the way that they are done. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hloni. That's really, I mean, you know how I feel about your work, and I think it's so insightful, and I think it's so important. And I really can't wait for people to really be able to access not just the dissertation, but I know the publications that are going to come from here, from your work, because I know how rich and how rich and thoughtful it is. So, and I think the comment sections just sums up how people have responded to your work, but also certainly the conversation that it sparked here. So thank you very much on behalf of the Department of Anthropology and Development Studies at UJ, but also Gauteng Anthropology. So I wish everyone a great Thursday. So it was a great turnout, especially for payday. So you and Dr. Brooks had the unfortunate event of having your events on payday, but it's great to see so many people, even on a day like this, when I know South Africans out there living their best lives. So thank you so much, Hloni. Yeah, thank you, everyone.